You has just had an audience with the Emperor Jones.
The Emperor Jones, a 1933 adaptation of the Eugene O'Neill play of the same name. The plot is a black congregation once they pray for the wily and ambitious Brutus Jones, who is off to work on the railway as a Pullman porter. Jones is conscripted to a chain gang after killing a gambler and escapes by clubbing a guard. On the run, he gets a job shoveling coal on a ship in the Caribbean and jumps off when they pass an island. When he is captured by the natives, his freedom is bought by a white trader. Jones tricks the tribe and becomes emperor and is outrun by his own magic. Directed by Dudley Murphy, starring Dudley Diggs as the trader Smithers, Frank Wilson as his rival and gambler Jeff, and Freddie Washington as Undine. The Emperor Jones also stars Paul Robeson in the title role of Brutus Jones. This was the choice of Lynn Webb. And what do you have to say about 1933's The Emperor Jones?
I'm going to get this off out of the way from the top. It is a shame bordering on criminal that this film, 1933's The Emperor Jones, which I watched on YouTube, is a better looking film than 1947's Heidi Ho. That was the first thing that hit me when I was watching this movie.
There's some money in this movie.
There's money in this movie.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's a good looking movie.
It's a very good looking film. And it is also a film that, you know, once you find the behind the story of it, stands out all the more because of the way that it was made. First, that, you know, is based on Eugene O'Neill's play of the same name. Eugene O'Neill was a famed playwright in the early part of the 20th century. And this adaptation comes after The Emperor Jones had multiple runs on the stage across the country and even overseas for a bit. But Eugene O'Neill, a man known for, you know, having some radical ways of thinking.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? This movie is made in 1933 after the movie industry has started their migration towards Hollywood and, you know, being centered in California. But this film is made in the abandoned studios that were built in New York, particularly in Astoria, New York. So it and by virtue of it being done so, it's made kind of like, you know, under the cloak of secrecy.
Yeah.
People really don't know what's happening on this film. You know, it's a film that is, you know, just like the play, based on a black man rising up to what in the African American world of that day was middle class as a Pullman porter.
Yes, sir.
On a train.
That's a good job.
That's a good job. That means that you were on the trains.
That's right.
You were shining shoes.
Yes, making big tips.
You're bringing people their papers, their lunches, their meals, and stuff like that. But you're making money.
Yes, sir.
So much so that the church has gathered around to celebrate Brutus Jones getting this job.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and this movie tells the story of this Pullman porter making his way through trials and tribulations aplenty.
Yeah.
To eventually, say what you want, become his own man.
Yes, sir.
Become truly the emperor of an island.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is 1933. This is, you know, there are movies and books about life of the black man at this time under the boot of the white man here in America.
Yeah.
But also in 1933, America is steeped in the Depression. People are like scraping for nickels and pennies, not even pennies, pennies and more pennies.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There are people jumping out of windows.
Yeah.
And I believe in 1933 are we on the brink of World War I, or we're just out of World War I?
No. We're out of World War I.
But World War II things
are simmering
overseas.
Yeah, Hitler's a kid in 33.
Right.
Yeah.
So
people are listening.
The world is topsy turvy, and yet this film dares to show this black man rising to become an emperor. This film dares to show this black man talking back to white people.
Yeah.
This film dares to show this black man showing any form of intellect and thoughtfulness.
Yeah, boy.
And craftiness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know?
Context of White Supremacy, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, October 31st, 2019. Man, we are just trying to survive the day. Hopefully you have your porch light out. We will not be disturbed. We can get through the evening without being toilet papered or anything else. This is the book club. This is our second study session on Dr. Gerald Horne, historian at the University of Houston. Dr. Horne's biography on the great Paul Robeson. We read the first chapter and got just a little bit into chapter 2 last week. During last week, we talked about Robeson's performance in the role Emperor Jones, just from what it sounded like, a black male who kills another black male in a dice game, goes to jail, breaks out of prison, goes to some fictitious island and asserts himself as ruler over some black people, and they overthrow him. I mean, nothing about that sounds like black self-respect. Sounds like the exact type of thing I could see white. In fact, it reminds me a lot of Django Unchained. Anyway, that was the Michaud Mission podcast, and they talk a lot about African-American cinema. They were talking about Emperor Jones in the segment that you just heard. They seem to think it was constructive value, and particularly pointing out that this film came out in 1933 and has a sassy black male who talks back to white people. I just point out, you did have Jack Johnson 20 years before. Matter of fact, more than 20 years, 25 years before The Emperor Jones was released. You had Jack Johnson, black male, cowbell there too, who was allowed to be heavyweight champion and actually allowed to strike and even knock out white people, even knocked out some white people's teeth while he battered and bruised his way to the heavyweight championship. So race soldiers will allow for any number of peculiar things. Django Unchained, like I said, they allow good coon flick from time to time. Anyway, we will get started. We're in chapter 2. Dr. Gerald Horne's Paul Robeson, The Artist as Revolutionary, Context of White Supremacy. This is audio segment number 1.
With such laudatory reviews and collaborations, Robeson and his wife quickly became virtual commuters from New York to London, and in the latter city, most notably and strikingly, they were quickly ensnared by a glittering array of luminaries. Still, in New York, they met George Gershwin, the famed composer, quite young and nice, said Miss Robeson. He played his Rhapsody in Blue, providing a wonderful time. The now heralded couple attended the farewell concert of the esteemed Fyodor Shalyapin, who, Miss Robeson pointed out proudly, remembered Paul and recognized him. shook his hands very cordially, and, it could have been added, passed the torch of politically committed singing to him. Another command performance was provided by the mystical Negro writer Jean Toomer, whom she found fascinating. I had enjoyed reading his cane so much. Is very tall and fine looking, and you literally see his mind work, since he was so clear and logical. She stressed with the drama in writing that rival her spouse's work on the stage. It was unclear if Miss Robeson reflected the views of her husband when she said of the writer Zora Neale Hurston, "I like her less and less the more I see of her." Communing with the literary and glitterary, the Robesons were increasingly to be found in the swankiest of soirees. On 17 January 1925, Robeson, at the behest of the tastemaster Carl van Vechten, sang at the latter's Manhattan home before a crowd of 150 that included influential publisher Alfred Knopf. Then, on April 19, 1925, even the typically effervescent Miss Robeson was floridly ecstatic. "Today is one of the most significant times in our lives," she began. The all-Negro concert by Paul and his accompanist, Larry Brown, took place at the Greenwich Village Theater tonight. The house was sold out yesterday, and at 8:15 p.m., when the theater doors opened, the lobby, sidewalk, and vicinity was packed, and hundreds were turned away. The audience was very high class. When the boys appeared, there was a thunderous applause lasting 3 minutes, and they were both very nervous. Yet, after each number, the applause was deafening, with curtain call after curtain call. What drove the overwhelming positive reception to this concert was the startling fact that he was, as Robeson put it, the first Negro to give an all-Negro presentation of music on the formal concert stage. One U.S. Negro periodical saluted the versatile performance by Robeson in his command of Negro spirituals and secular songs, elevated by the gorgeous beauty of Robeson's voice. An indication of the quality of his performance was the fact that fully as many were turned away as the little theater could accommodate, and the venture has made necessary a second revival. Robeson's spouse did not exaggerate when she spoke enthusiastically of the huge crowd filling the lobby and the sidewalk in front of the theater. Nor did she engage in puffery when she wrote that all the seats and all the standing room had been sold out, and that at the end of the program, the entire audience remained seated, clamoring for more, and their enthusiasm was rewarded with many encores. The April 1925 concert also marked the intensifying warmth of Robeson's tie to Walter White of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, the premier organization battling for equality. White, a talented writer in his own right, was as fair-skinned as Robeson's spouse and used this phenotype to investigate lynchings of African Americans undetected. "I have known Robeson for nearly 10 years, said White in 1927, a man he found out to be one of the most talented individuals I have ever met in this or any other country. You can always count on me to the limit," said White with enthusiasm in April 1925. Robeson was impressed with his novel about this barbarous practice. It was in August 1925 that Miss Robeson came home from breakfast and found Paul crying and cursing over Walter's book. This is a supreme compliment, for Paul never cries except when deeply moved. It was suggested that the book be converted for the stage, that it would make a marvelous play, and Paul would be the ideal man to cast as the hero. Things look interesting, she concluded beamingly. Miss Robeson recalled fondly how White, in turn, worked untiringly for the success of the concert. He was one of those rare beings, she exulted, who was a loyal and consistent friend. It was through Walter that Paul met Karl Benvetchen, Haywood Braun, Conrad Berkovicai, the Spingards, Joel and Arthur, and a number of others who could make and break careers. In fact, after the onset of the Red Scare, when Robeson became the leading target, White and Arthur Spingard turned against him vociferously. Robeson went to Philadelphia and had a nice visit with Roland Hayes, his peer as a singer, she said. Buoyed by the applause still ringing in their ears, the now affluent couple headed eastward once more for England, and at sea they were opportuned by Senator Joseph Frelinghuysen of New Jersey, a member of the U.S. elite who, Miss Robeson commented pointedly, came and sat down and had a long talk with Paul and gave him a personal letter to deliver to the U.S. ambassador in London, and further sought to arrange for Paul to sing for President Calvin Coolidge on our return. He was perfectly lovely, she cooed, a reflection of the rising popularity of Robeson. By the early summer of 1925, he and his spouse were residing in London and enjoying every moment. He loved England, she said. The calm, homely beauty and comfort of London was appealing to both. He felt even more at home in London than he had in America, she concluded. There were a few inconveniences for him as a Negro in London. He did not have to live in a segregated district. He leased a charming flat in Chelsea. In Manhattan, he faced restrictions, and outside this charmed life for him was even more difficult. At hotels outside of New York, said Miss Robeson, it was almost impossible for him to secure accommodation. As for Robeson, he was captivated by London. I think I'd like to live here, he said. Someday I will, he proclaimed, confidently and accurately. By late August 1925, the peripatetic couple were ensconced in London, residing at 18 Milton Chambers, 128 Cheney Road, a decided upgrade from their first residence in Harlem. Our front rooms overlook the Thames, chortled Miss Robeson. We are between Albert and Battersea Bridges, near Whistler Bend in the heart of Chelsea. Though the Robesons were lodged in one of the more affluent sections of town, when house hunting, they were appalled to find lovely places with a toilet in the backyard, and so many lovely places have no baths at all. The site they dotted on in Chelsea was beautiful, with such amenities as bath, electricity, phone, etc., all for 4 guineas. Not far away in Hampstead, it was beautiful, said Miss Robeson. They encountered Emma Goldman, who had made her mark as an anarchist in the U.S. This activist admired the man she called Dear Paul and pledged to come behind the stage after the performance, adding, I wish with all my heart that Paul's interpretation of the Emperor Jones should make the cold-blooded Englishman realize his greatness. She shared intelligence about the Irish writer James Joyce and provided Robeson with contacts in Germany. Miss Robeson was taken with Goldman, a middle-aged Jewish with a fine mind but starved for love, who she enjoyed thoroughly. Still, it was with Goldman, who was becoming a militant opponent of the recently proclaimed Soviet Union, with whom Robeson discussed this controversial nation, as his experience with Jim Crow and the welcome he received in London by way of contrast was forcing him to clearer political realizations. In October 1925, the Robesons headed for the French Riviera. They chose Villefranche-sur-Mer, a tiny French town midway between Nice and Monte Carlo, a lovely quiet village nestling at the foot of the Southern Alps. There, the couple sat in the nude. There, they bumped into Claude McKay, the radical Jamaican writer who had spent time in Moscow, who introduced them to the similarly radical Max Eastman. Paul listened eagerly to the talk about Russia and socialism, said his spouse. He also dined with Rex Ingram, an African-American actor, who was able to brief him about opportunities opening in Hollywood. Carl Van Vechten was a godfather of the then ongoing Harlem Renaissance, a spicy potpourri of arts centered in the uptown community that Robeson had called home, but with the tentacles reaching deeper into the African diaspora and the continent itself. It has been insufficiently recognized to what extent Robeson was not only an exemplar of this heralded Renaissance, but it is likely also its most public and popular personality. This was known to Van Vechten, who seized the occasion of the April 1925 concert to praise Robeson's natural bass voice, which posed an exceptionally pleasing quality and was of considerable range besides. Before his appearance in O'Neill's plays, he had for a period substituted for the bass singer with the Four Harmony Kings in Shuffle Along, the well-attended musical. Like others, Van Vechten too thought that Robeson, in the poignant simplicity of his art, resembled Chaliapin. In 1925, the stormy applause in New York was mirrored by a similar outburst in London. Paul and Larry gave a concert at the Drury Lane, said Miss Robeson, and managed to pack that vast theater. The audience stomps and cheers approval, and the press is enthusiastic. Then the Prince of Wales commands them to sing for him, and the King of Spain, the Duke and Duchesses of New York request them to sing. Lord Beaverbrook, Baroness Ravensdale, and other royals and nobility, too numerous to note, do likewise. On behalf of the Prince of Wales, Brigadier General G.F. Trotter, writing from St. James's Palace, instructed Robeson that a party was being given here, and all would be pleased if you can come and sing to his guests. One of many such invitations Robeson was to receive in coming years. With this, Robeson's career took off like a gyrating Roman candle. He had vindicated the weighty words of Czech musician Anton Dvorak, who was as early as 1893 had become convinced that the future of music of the U.S. must be built on the foundations of the song, which are called Negro melodies. They must become the basis of serious and original school of composition, which should be established in the USA. Robeson's adaptation of Dvorak may not have been accidental in that he admitted that during my younger days, it was my privilege to study with Harvey Loomis, who was a student of Dvorak's, and most importantly, the actor's dear friend was Harry T. Burleigh, a leading figure in his own right, and often Burleigh, too, spoke of Dvorak. Robeson, with a twist, took this insight and applied it worldwide as he sang, initially a range of spiritual and secular songs grounded in the Negro experience before recorded audiences, twice in King Albert Hall in London and for the British royal family, the Prince of Wales, Winston Churchill, etc. He toured Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Scandinavia. What had become a part-time preoccupation, performing, became his occupation, a decision made all the easier since it could be pursued beyond the narrow confines of North America, particularly in Britain and Ireland, which had become two of his favorite nations. Later, speaking to the BBC, he recollected about visiting Ireland many times. "I've kissed the Blarney," was his insider conclusion, and known many great Irishmen. The great playwright Eugene O'Neill was a friend of mine. I knew James Stephens and James Joyce. A lot of his material makes sense to me, he said in a preemptive move, deflecting points about the later alleged elliptical writing style. But whenever I used to go to Ireland, he continued, I was always carried away by a sense of fantasy. Indeed, he continued, one day I found myself on a train not far from Cork. Looking out the window, I saw mists covering the top of the hills. They looked mysterious and inviting, and quite suddenly, I had a mad urge to stop the train. I wanted to get out and walk up the top of those hills, right up there into the clouds. I actually had to stop myself, and in that moment, I realized that it is the Irish countryside itself that opens the doors of the mind to the strange and compelling world of fantasy, which is so much a part of the tradition of Ireland. His notoriety was not limited to Ireland. He recounted to the BBC his early performances in Wales, singing Negro spirituals. He managed to sing in Welsh with a wonderful Welsh choir that made the spirituals sound very near to heavenly music, in that, irrespective of language, Robeson's overreaching theme, the message was transmitted. The Negro's easy approach to death was an attitude adopted creatively given the atrocious conditions faced. In other words, death was something which comes even as a comfort, a reward, not something to be afraid of. The rapturous reception he received in Wales contributed to his being tapped to star in Showboat, a musical featuring what became his signature song, Old Man River, whose lyrics he adapted creatively over the years as his own consciousness deepened, converting it from a baleful lament into his trademark, a song of struggle. Ultimately, Robeson was to perform this song countless times, including a memorable performance in Harlem in 1947 when he was under siege. This was, said Robeson then, a song which has for me a meaning that is both sentimental and social. I changed some of the words. Instead of the words, I gets weary and sick of trying, I'm tired of living and scared of dying, I sang, I keep laughing instead of crying. I must keep fighting until I'm dying. It was this transmutation that symbolized how Robeson the artist became a revolutionary force. Showboat ushered into the global stage a new age for the musical in which songs became integral to the narrative and character development rather than gratuitous routines. However, like the Emperor Jones, it was not greeted with equanimity by all critics. J.A. Rogers, the prominent U.S. Negro columnist, declared that this work was a deliberate attempt on the part of the white American to carry his anti-Negro propaganda into Europe. In assessing Robeson's early theatrical career, it is neither easy or simple to find examples of work that stand the test of time, or even of the era in which it was produced. There were many turning points in Robeson's dazzling career, but this musical was one, as he described it later. This musical, he said, not only saved my life, it saved Larry's too, referring to his accompanist. You see, back in 1927, we were two very hungry characters, for with his added income came added expenses, and another hallmark of Robeson's life was that he was not an expert manager of money. I might say we were starving, he continued. Then I was booked to sing in Paris, where they gave me a very big build-up. After that, I was supposed to go on tour of Europe. But upon arriving in France, it was October, and I caught influenza. What did I do? I sang. And this was one of the failures of my life. The house was, as typically the case, was packed with famous people, but he gave not so much more than a croak, and they couldn't hear that more than 2 or 3 rows back from the front of the stalls. 2 weeks later, I'd gotten over my influenza and I sang again, but nobody came to listen, and the grand tour was off. My son, Paulie, was on the way at the time, and my wife, Essie, needed me. So I left poor Larry, flat broke, in Paris with all the cash we had between us. I went home. Then a friend got me a job in Showboat in London. That was my turning point. Such was his historical assessment. 3 weeks later, Larry was with me, and we were well known enough to do a Sunday concert on stage at the Drury Lane. A week after that, we packed the Royal Albert Hall, and he concluded triumphantly, "That's what Showboat did for us, and now you can understand why I'm always happy to sing the great song from the show, Yes, Old Man River." He knew the composer, George Gershwin, from their stay in New York, and in my early days, he often played for me at parties, and also attended his other turning point, the April 1925 concert in New York, where his first idea for his opera, Porgy and Bess, sprang from listening to our music. Showboat, a story featuring Dixie treachery, was a wild success and led directly to the Robesons settling in Hampstead by 1929, the London neighborhood they had looked upon longingly for some time. Their resident, as Miss Robeson put it, was overlooking the famous Heath. Paris marked a departure for another reason, for it was from here that he raised searching questions about his singing that were to lead him down a fruitful intellectual and cultural path, learning more languages so he could communicate more effectively with diverse audiences. As for my singing, he said, I am convinced that in order to attain very substantial success financially, I'll need other songs, some in the language of the country and classics that they know. They'll come and rave over our program once or twice, but they really don't get the words. The songs are simple. He pointed out that Roland Hayes went to Italy for concerts and lost money. He had to cancel his Russian trip. But given his escalating expenses, we must have money, and thus I must be the complete artist. For with our debts and responsibilities, there are no alternatives. Of course, if he returned home, this language dilemma would evaporate, which is why the money is at home, while Europe should be visited for work only alternate years. These are my firm convictions, but as things turned out, this was not true. For Robeson, instead, began to deepen his knowledge of languages. This introduced him to the unity of humankind and thus dovetailed with his developing socialist belief, which too reflected a universal yearning. Robeson may have had more than one turning point because, like a rocket propelled into the cosmos, there were various boost phases as he shot higher and higher. Surely, his meritorious reputation as an artist appeared to be boundless as early as the late 1920s, as his renown in Europe served to boost further his recognition in his homeland. Intermittently, from 1926 to 28, he was touring Europe in concert, which led to equally rapturous receptions during yet another episodic tour of the continent from 1931 to 33. That year of his complaint, 1927, was also the year in which he and Lawrence Brown appeared at the now fabled benefit for the Harlem Museum of African Art. Within months, the Robesons were hosting parties at their London flat, with guests like Fred Astaire, Alberta Hunter, and Lord Beaverbrook making appearances. Sir Philip Sassoon also had become part of their circle. Soon, Robeson was a favorite guest at the House of Commons, where he was spotted by an eagle-eyed journalist chatting earnestly with the Prime Minister, Ramsay MacDonald. To cap it off, in November 1927, Robeson became a father when his only son, Paul Jr., was born. Sooner still, he was to hear that the bon vivant, Harold Jackman, came back to Paris with glowing reports of your London success. While back in Paris, the alumni magazine of Rutgers was now proud to claim their most talented alumnus, telling one and all that Robeson was the present reigning favorite of the Parisian amusement world, as many notable Parisians and a host of celebrities were to be seen at his oversubscribed concerts. Robeson was flying high, indulging the luxury of philosophical musings. Art is a creation, or rather recreation, of beauty. Artists see what others omit. He brings it to others. Yet, he was sufficiently grounded to be capable of filling Manhattan's Carnegie Hall, the mecca of musical artists, named after a fabulously wealthy Scottish-American steel baron, had no trouble at all in filling it with my voice, he said in 1929. Over 1,000 people were turned away. The attendants at the hall said that no one had ever filled the hall twice in 5 days, which he accomplished easily. Robeson remained bicontinental, for by 1928, along with his spouse, their newly born son, Paul Jr., or Polly, and his mother-in-law were all occupying a large late Victorian abode in St. John's Wood in London. Repeat, in Van Vetchen's word, with servants with Cockney accents, and, in the fashion of the day, a dining room featuring large oil paintings of Turks. Elsewhere, whatnots, porcelain, glass, and various knickknacks. Van Vetchen had arrived there for a party, which was lovely. There was a great deal of food and much champagne. All the distinguished Negroes in London were there. Turner Layton and Clarence Johnstone, a well-known vocal and piano duo, who sang, and Leslie Hutchison came too, who happened to be one of the biggest cabaret stars of that era. Then there were the usual assortment of elite Londoners, Lady Ravensdale, Lord Curzon's daughter, Hugh Walpole, and most of the stars of the English theater. Robeson sang too, helping to make the event a great success. Van Vetchen told Gertrude Stein, "I think you should come to London to go to a party at Paul's, and I'm sure he would give one for you." Robeson was the toast of London, with the witty, droll novelist Evelyn Waugh penning a portrait of him in one of his best-known novels, Decline and Fall. Before adoring audiences in crowded venues, he was singing in Vienna, Prague, and Budapest, with the enraptured assembled, often including U.S. ambassadors, and potentates. It was not deemed unusual when they came backstage to congratulate him or offered to entertain him at their residences, something they would be loath to do back home. The press had gotten a hold of accounts of his income. The Philadelphia Tribune, an African-American journal, initially reported that Robeson had sung before English royalty, and the supposedly related point that he now had an attitude that it would be beneath his dignity to appear in colored review. But then it added that he had signed for a princely sum of $500 up front, which would also be his weekly salary, plus 5% of the gross in amounts ranging up to $20,000 and 10% for sums thereafter, to sign to appear on stage. In inflation-adjusted terms, $500 in 1928 would be roughly amount to $6,500 today, and $20,000 about $260,000. It was during this period that he made the acquiescence of His Royal Highness, the future King George VI. He recalled down the Lover's Lane written by Will Marion Cook, with words by Paul Laurence Dunbar, both acclaimed African-American artists. This work, said Robeson, was a great favorite of George VI from the moment when he had first had the privilege of playing it to him when he was Duke of York, way back in 1929. Yet with all the hosannas of praise that greeted his most quotidian of utterances, Robeson remained dissatisfied. Just before his Carnegie Hall triumph, he had ventured to the theater and left, as he observed, upset about American audiences, as they were so terribly crude, present only for entertainment, not because of love of theater, and certainly not for enlightenment. Very strange feeling for me to be sitting in a balcony, since though he was financially capable, I am almost afraid to purchase orchestra seats for fear of insult. And, by way of sharp contrast, when in England, my being in theater is almost an event, certainly not a cause for insult. In New York, close by where he was born in New Jersey, there was no sense of peace, calm, freedom as in London. I feel so oppressed and weighed down, he wailed. Then there was the standing offer to take the lead role in a play that was to define his legacy. I am very alarmed about the chances of Othello, he moaned, thinking of the interracial love scenes. Don't see how American audience would accept play. Of course the liberal group would, but the mass of theater goers never. During this era, U.S. producers often steered clear of this tragedy, or made sure the lead actors were all white, with the Moor played in blackface, i.e., with their faces covered in ebony dye of some sort. Robeson was twisting in agony, able to escape the normalized ravages that had beset so many Africans in North America, but knowing full well that a sorry plight continued to bedevil too many others. And even in London, which he had constructed as an idol, there were serpents in the garden. For near the same time, he was unleashing his torment in his diary about the U.S. An executive at London's swank Savoy Hotel was apologizing. After consulting with the manager of the grill room there, Philip Cox informed Dear Paul and Essie that those in charge there, so far as he is aware, did not know of any who referred to a color bar or to any restrictions whatever that had been raised in order to exclude the couple. Their policy is to attract people of all nations, even those who at first glance seem to hail from the slums of the British Empire colonized Africa. They say that the very fact that you went there so often in the past proves that their policy has been and is still the same, he assured. Attached was a night cable detailing that the question of the color bar against the Negroes in England is being raised for the first time in acute form by the Robesons, and several public bodies have protested. Robeson would not have been surprised by the designation of the true culprit. The annual invasion of American tourists is blamed by many persons for the exclusion of Negroes from some restaurants and hotels recently. For, as their wont, these interlopers insisted on the global export of their peculiar folkways. Cox admitted that a sensation was caused by the receipt of a letter from the celebrated American Negro singer and actor Paul Robeson, stating that he and his wife had recently been refused admittance to the dining hall and grill room of a leading London hotel. At this juncture, Robeson was better known as an artist, but since he was already well on his way to becoming the best-known U.S. Negro, in other words, a member of a dispossessed group in a potent nation, he was beginning to be looked towards as a tribune by others similarly situated. This included Herbert Murray of Victoria, Australia, of the Australian Aboriginal Progressive League, who informed Robeson that we are having a hard time fighting with the white folks, referring to we people who are a despised race, a race who has been denied really the right to live. Imploringly, he beseeched Robeson, you should visit Australia, since we have met a lot of your people who have performed on different stages here. Robeson was not able to comply for decades. Though the Robesons had climbed the slippery pole of success, they had chosen not to shroud their objections to the color bar that they might have been able to personally evade, but which would entangle others not as well situated. Untimely, Robeson was to conclude that the intermittent objections to the noxiousness were not enough. There had to be a root and branch overhaul of society, a process that involved construction of a socialist commonwealth. Chapter 3, Rising Revolutionary. When Robeson played the lead role in Othello in London in 1930, box office records were set and the tragedy ran for 6 weeks. Reportedly, it garnered a hefty 22,000 pounds in the first few weeks of production. It was not unusual for early performances to be greeted by 20 or more curtain calls. His already skyrocketing reputation ascended further, for this production struck a chord in the populace. This was not unlike what happened in the 19th century when Robeson's predecessor as premier tragedian, Ira Aldrich, was also catapulted into further prominence when performing the same role in Europe. This suggested that the plot involving a Moor in a contradictory relationship with the state tapped into unresolved dilemmas about racism and the color bar, which Robeson had confronted only recently in London in a blaze of publicity. The interracial scenes in this play also resonated, for just as Robeson was entering the stage in London, a worldwide cause célèbre was erupting in Scottsboro, Alabama, when 9 young black youths were falsely accused of sexual molestation of 2 white women. They were headed for execution, like so many African Americans previously. But then, the International Labor Defense, ILD, initiated by the Communist Party, launched a global campaign in league with Moscow. This campaign saved the lives of the accused and led to significant reforms of the criminal justice system in the U.S. This effort, which led to raucous demonstrations at U.S. legislations across the globe, converted Jim Crow into an international cause, not unlike which befell South African apartheid a few decades later. The ILD was led by Robeson's good friend from Harlem, William Patterson, also an attorney who had strayed from the path of wealth accumulation and had become a leading U.S. communist. It was their conversions in Europe that compelled Robeson to make a more decisive turn to the left and socialism. The concatenation of Othello, combined with Scottsboro, was a catalyst for Robeson's transformation, and the glowing reviews he received in London redound to his advantage in his homeland, for the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which had within its leadership one of his biggest fans, Walter White, began to beat the drum of publicity on his behalf, flooding the news media with press reliefs about his triumphs. But it was not just White. According to one source, the preeminent intellectuals Rebecca West and Aldous Huxley argued that they never saw better Shakespearean acting in all of their lives. Robeson was not so moved by his handiwork, for as he subsequently told the New Statesman, for the first 2 weeks, in every scene I played with Desdemona, the love interest of Robeson's Othello, that girl couldn't get near me. I was backing away from her all the time like a plantation hand in the parlor. In other words, Robeson knew that a major taboo of U.S. life, the violation of which could lead to lynching, was heterosexual mixing across the color line. And even when engaged in fiction on stage, this taboo haunted his performance, giving it added resonance. Speaking of his tempestuous scenes with Desdemona, Robeson said, "I wouldn't care to play those scenes in some parts of the United States. The audience would get rough. In fact, might become very dangerous. Without outraged audience members charging the stage with mayhem in mind, possible if not likely." Robeson well knew that in 1930, not only could he not perform Othello in the U.S. in the way he did in London, but most likely a production in his homeland was highly improbable then. After all, he and Desdemona had to kiss and embrace several times. In violation of basic norms in the Republic, While, said Robeson, the English don't mind. His previous well-known roles in Emperor Jones and All God's Children, especially the latter, presented like issues, but, said Robeson, presented no problem of understanding. That is, in approaching a role, as an actor, he had to grasp the understanding of the character, his background, his language, and the portrayal of the character in terms of theater technique. But these two O'Neill creations, treading as they did familiar U.S. ground, were easier for Robeson to grasp. The question of a Moor in Europe centuries earlier was quite different. The milieu of the play was not my own familiar background, he conceded. The characters were not people I had always known or known about. The one familiar saving fact was that Othello to me was an African Negro, not a Moor. And I played him as a Negro. In sum, Othello was another matter. But when performing this character decades later in London, I decided to get into Othello from the inside, from his point of view. A new interpretation founded on a deeper understanding of Shakespeare, based on extensive study. Thus, he said, I have come to think of Othello not so much as a Negro, but rather as a foreigner and alien who finds himself in a strange country, society, and culture. This deeper understanding, too, was part of Robeson's own political maturation, driven by his turn to the left, generated by Scottsboro and his personal friendship with Patterson. Robeson's groping as an actor in his attempt to grasp the lineaments of Othello was of a piece that was his groping as a black man seeking to grasp the lineaments of capitalism, colonialism, and white supremacy. As for the former, he confessed later, I did not know what the hell I was doing. As an actor in Othello, though, I was praised to the skies as a natural genius. But in 1930, I had more false pride than today and wouldn't admit it. I was like a child stumbling in the dark. Playing Othello provided Robeson with a profounder understanding of white supremacy. To that extent, it was an art that helped him to drive him to revolutionary understanding. Performing this role, he said, has taken away from me all kinds of fears, all sense of limitation. Quite simply, it has made me free. Seemingly, the confidence he gained from the generous praise heaped on his stage depictions reverberated to the benefit of his concert appearances. His acting heightened his public profile, making many more willing to pay to hear him sing. Paul's tour is going splendidly, said his spouse with brio in 1930. Everywhere he has phenomenal houses in these days of unsuccessful concerts. The sterner critic might also have described Robeson's relationship with his spouse similarly as unsuccessful. Robeson was constantly in the public eye and was praised lavishly for his handsome good looks and, according to Eslanda, was not opposed to taking advantage of this sensitive situation. Another U.S. national, Anita Reynolds, was in London during this time, and, she tittered, stories of the Robeson's fraught relationship were making the rounds there. He was rumored to be having an affair with a woman who was very close to the royal family. His Rolls Royce could be seen parked within walking distance of her home. Miss Robeson chased all over London looking for the car and trying to catch him. As with so many other couples, these stories would have remained safely tucked away in the vapors of rumors, except They were confirmed by Miss Robeson in her revealing book about her husband. In these remarkable pages, she unveiled the shakiness of their relationship, confirming the stories about what many saw as Robeson's wandering eye for other women, leaving her with bruised feelings. Needless to say, Robeson was displeased with this part of her otherwise arresting biography. The allegations to this end led Martha Gruning to seek an injunction to restrain publication of this biography, leading to dueling thrusts from opposing counsels. Clever move to have your book appear on the day after Paul's opening night in Othello, mused Emma Goldman. She went on to note that Paul is doing strenuous work, singing so often and traveling about the provinces. It is fortunate that he has such splendid physique, adding, he will be the most handsome Othello I have ever seen. These random assertions, his traveling or carousing, as Miss Robeson might have said, his splendid physique, and how he was most handsome was also the message delivered in the book, albeit more directly and explicitly. During this time of controversy erupted when a Philadelphia exhibition banned a life-size nude sculpture of Robeson. Though this was on racist, not salacious grounds, one observer was among many moved to note that Robeson's figure was almost an exact replica of Adonis. Another commentator made it clear that lack of clothing is not reason for the rejection, though this absence was what attracted so much attention in the first place, suggested of the obviousness of the physical attractiveness of Robeson. Too much can be made of this since, after all, any extramarital liaisons of Robeson was designed to be surreptitious. For example, the press targeted the British heiress Nancy Cunard as a Robeson paramour and rival of Miss Robeson, but she was dumbfounded by this allegation. Remarkably, perplexedly, I met him once in Paris in 1926, and that provided hardly enough time to consummate a romance. Still, the press continued to vibrate with stories of his assumed liaisons with Cunard, forcing Robeson to deny even more bizarre stories of their relationship. The article is absolutely absurd, he told one periodical of one assumed expose, since Miss Cunard has never been in the studio in which I was broadcasting and consequently could not have been ejected at my suggestion. Hence, he rejected these dreadful attacks, but they kept coming since, as a celebrity, Robeson was fair game, a recipient of poison-tipped arrows and a target for a public with an apparent ceaselessness interest in his personal life. Moreover, and strikingly, the presumed object of Robeson's romantic attention in coming years, according to his spouse, was Nina Mae McKinney, an actor of note who happened to be African American. Don't start listening to Harlem gossip, she warned her mother, except to be amused by it, since I am not influenced by any of it in the slightest, for I graduated from that years ago. I'm much too busy doing things which interest and satisfy me to stop for that junk. It all may be or may not be true as stuff Nina Mae said about Paul being her man, since she may even believe it herself. In short, some stories about Robeson's affairs seem either fanciful or of small concern to his spouse. As so often happened with celebrated figures, there were those who claimed ties to Robeson, or projected ties upon him, that were not real. Still, this could not obscure equally real problems in their relationship. From the onset, Eslanda had invested quite a bit of her life in building her husband's career at the expense of her own. It was in 1924 that she revealed in her diary, "Start my month's vacation from Presbyterian Hospital today. I am sick to death of the lab and do hope that I won't ever have to go back." By 1931, she was commenting, "Discussed divorce with Paul, and we are both quite happy and pleased over the prospect of our freedom." Just before that, she observed, "Paul urged me to stay here," meaning Switzerland, "a frequent haunt for the couple and the sight, as shall be seen, of one of the more intriguing films, so he can carry on with Peggy, his presumed lover. I suppose it will be inconvenient having me in London and trying to meet her there." The Robesons shared many commonalities, a similar political trajectory particularly, which is why they were married for decades. But, as so often happens, there were differences between the two. She had her own complaints. Their permanent break was inevitable since we have never had the same taste in people, places, things. His education was literacy, classical. Mine was entirely scientific as a chemist. His temperament was artistic, mine strictly practical. He is vague, I am definite. He likes late hours, I'm an early bird. He is not ambitious, although once having undertaken a thing, and otherwise language study, he is never content until he accomplishes it perfectly as possible. I am essentially and aggressively ambitious in contrast. She could have added that while he had found his métier as an artist, she was still stumbling and would not find her footing for some time as a journalist.
Context of White Supremacy. So that is the first audio segment. Dr. Gerald Horne's Paul Robeson, the Artist as Revolutionary. We are in chapter 3. We are, at least with the book that I have, we would be on page 46. That's where we're starting at in chapter 3. Number to dial if you have thoughts to share, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. That number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. I said pay attention to the focus on the physique of Mr. Robeson as we read. If you have any thoughts on what we heard from the portion of the reading so far, feel free to share if you have any questions or thoughts that stick out. If you have a physical copy of the book and you're kind of reading along, pay attention to the footnotes. There's some interesting sources. Mr. Robeson wrote his own autobiography, Here I Stand. Might be worth investigating to see, in his direct commentary about his life and times. But yeah, make sure we're kind of checking. I was doing that this week more so than last week. Give a glance at the index from time to time, just see what's being referenced. You might find a book or three worth checking out. Also want to make sure that I get in for our narration for this week. I have said for years, narrating is really challenging. It takes quite a bit of time and energy. All of the folks, Alfre Woodard, I believe, did the narration for the last book, Tar Baby, that we just finished up. But I mean, it takes skill. to do the reading and to add that energy and the inflection, especially if you're going to do the different characters and all that and pronunciations. It is hard work, and I hate doing it. We thankfully this week had lots of help. Retired firefighter actually did quite a bit of narration. We just had difficulty in getting the file transferred to me so that I could upload the whole thing. Normal time, I would have probably taken, a good 30 to 60 seconds of broadcast time to stomp and curse about having to do the narration for 2 weeks in a row, but no way. Our listener, Henry in Chicago, pitched in and was able to do the entire segment. And in fact, I had told him, oh, don't even worry about it. Retired firefighter is going to hook it up. Don't even worry about it. And so I'm struggling like, oh man, I don't know if we're going to get it. I don't know when to get in. Whammo, get the email just in case. Looking out like, whew. Clutch. And he had done the reading last week as well. So super appreciative of both retired firefighter and Henry in Chicago. Narrating is really hard work. Whew. That's it. Star 6-1, if folks have observations, thoughts on the first portion of the reading, I'll leave it at the physique. Anything stood out about the attention focus on Mr. Robeson's physical appearance? That would be good. Good to hear thoughts on that as we proceed. Questions, thoughts, observations from the first portion of the reading. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, struggling to get the switchboard to do right. Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right, so first few folks who dialed in with a hand up, if you have comments to share, lines should be open. Let's see. Irie, retired firefighter, aforementioned. I'll nab other folks as I see hands.
Hello. Hi, may I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Gus. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Gerald Horne is the same historian that contributes to Black Agenda Radio. And he's had commentary on, sundry of topics when it comes to non-white Black people. So it should make for a good read. I didn't get a chance to hear everything, the first part of the segment, but I did come in on the when he was talking about his portrayal of what do you call it? What is it again? Not Oedipus Rex.
Othello.
I'm sorry, I'm getting my dramas mixed up. Yeah. So I do know that that is a timeless favorite of suspected racists because they also had Denzel Washington doing a version of it, and then there was a modern version of it with, I believe, Omar Epps in a movie called Gold, and I think it was like in the late 90s. So they definitely love this particular this piece. But I'm going to continue reading along with you all. And one last thing before I go, I'm planning on getting a vocal, like a good vocal recorder, because I did want to help with reading books. I just haven't, had the chance to get it yet. I'm a victim. I don't have the money for it quite yet, but when I do, Gus, I'll alert you by email, so maybe if I don't get a chance to contribute this time around, I do want to contribute since right now I don't have any other way to contribute to the cow. So thank you, and I'll mute my line, and have a good evening, everyone.
Love it. Irie, always love folks who are down to volunteer to help out with the narration. We've had so many people over the years, Red in Nevada, Mel, it's been Lots of folks who have pitched in. Black Mom in Detroit. Lots of people who have pitched in and done really great work with the narration. It is tough, man. Oof. So glad I didn't have to read this week. Retired firefighter, if you have thoughts, much obliged, sir, for the attempt. We will figure it out. If you have commentary, sir, you should be with us.
Greetings, Gus. Greetings, everyone. I have read that portion so much during this past week that I almost can repeat it by heart from reading it over and over again to record it. But as a dumb victim of racial white supremacy, I wasn't successful in able to transfer it over to you. On the instance of Mr. Robeson's physicality, it just has Dr. Welsing all over it as far as her scientific understanding of the global system of racism and white supremacy and how white people on the surface would act like they deplore non-white black people, but at the same time, they have a deep admiration for the black body. Apparently, Mr. Robeson proceeded the same type of adulation that I've heard about Jim Brown. I mean, almost to the letter. As far as the with white males, it was a form of jealousy. White females, it was an attraction, not a sincere one, because of course we have the global system of racism and white supremacy, and they're definitely not willing to put that global system down. But I guess it goes with the metaphor. They want their cake and eat it too, so to speak. What it seems as though with the book that has taken the shape, the way Mr. Horne have wrote the book, he first started off by mentioning I guess in my estimation would be the natural talents of this person, which to me is almost like unprecedented. You hardly ever hear about a person that has all of those abilities that he's displayed and able to utilize packed into one person. And in turn, he quickly was in a position during times where non-white black people were getting lynched every day, utilize those skills in order to get compensated financially. Another thought that I have of the differences of white people in quote unquote Europe and in this part of the world, which was mentioned quite a number of times in all of the readings, the different contrasts, meaning that acts of racism, white supremacy, and the behavior was quote unquote much worse over here. I would say primarily because of the numbers, for one thing. Scientifically, the means to travel was not by airplane. It wasn't frequent. You would spend weeks or months on the high seas getting back and forth from this part of the world to the part of the world that's called Europe and other places to get there, where, white people went out in the world and stole and raped and robbed. It wouldn't be unusual for the victims to want to venture to whereas all of the stolen goods are at. But it was a lot difficult during that time because of the means was not as possible as it is, let's say, today. But Paul Robeson was one of the unique Negroes to be able to do that. And plus, he was able to entertain white people. Normally, I would say, as a non-white black person, they probably would just resonate and stay in that particular lane. But he had the nerve to want to attempt to solve the problem in his way, solve the problem of racist white supremacy, which hasn't really totally came up yet, but I do suspect it is going to come up on a formal level. And so those are some of my thoughts in this particular reading, and also joined in with the reading from the last week. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. We are all still learning about newfangled computer technology, how to replace white supremacy with justice. Still learning. Let's see. Mr. Demery 4 and our other narrator for this week, Henry in Chicago. Both of you all are with us. Feel free.
Yes, may I be heard?
Mr. Demery 4. Yes, sir.
Yes, greetings to the other callers and listeners. I'm impressed with the book and appreciative of the people who volunteered to read. Thanks to a firefighter in Florida for recommending the book and offering to narrate. It is impressive to know of a individual with so many attributes as Mr. Robeson. But some of the things that stood out to me, that was contrary to what I knew and had an image of him, was in this book talking about a place with a constructed face, a white face that could be designed for him, and his face built up to fit it. I would have doubted that Paul Robeson ever, participated in anything that would require him to paint his face white or to pretend he was a white person, but, I could be mistaken. I may have read that part incorrectly, but the Emperor Jones, he said that he had turning points in his life, and it was more than one. But I think one of the big turning points was when he did Emperor Jones, and not only for the expert way that he carried out the role, but his presence, and like you said, his physicality. And now he's in Europe and he's doing these plays and concerts, and he's over 6'3", 250 pounds, former professional football player. He's described in the book as handsome, and you know that the white women in the system is going to jump all over that, and especially in the power dynamic, whereas most of these names that was mentioned were people in like the societal elite in Europe or some entertainment business where they could get close to other entertainers. And a lot of times the subject was going to, how he was built. I think they mentioned a nude statue of him. And then one other place in there, he was in, I guess him and his wife were in one of the European countries, and it said that he was sitting out nude. If you go to Europe and partake in the liberty of, nude areas, then you're going to excite some of these interests. And I'm surprised that they didn't mention some homoerotic material in here. But the one play that he did, I guess, where he played the spouse of an abusive white woman. Now, I would really like to see that. It said that the KKK was fiercely outraged because of the explosive theme. So I guess that's, well, there's several points in here that would justify a cowbell, but I think that was later when he started having problems in his marriage, and there was rumors of him, which is understandable if you're physically attractive and you're talented and you're intelligent and everything this guy had going for him. How could he not be an object of some type of attraction from the opposite sex? But he came home, his wife came home and found him crying. And he was crying over a book that he had read, Walter White. Walter White was a dynamic lawyer with the NAACP, and there was a defense, a defense fund that he was in charge of, where he would investigate these lynchings around the United States. And the book, I guess, touched him so deeply that he was crying behind that. And they briefly talked about the Harlem Renaissance, where I thought that he would probably fit pretty nicely into that particular group. And then it seems a part of his life, it said that I guess he got sick and tired of singing Negro spirituals and that type of thing. But he did a lot of investigation into languages, and which helped him to form his view, a worldview, and global outlook. And I think that it eventually brought about a change in him. And that there were some parts, a little bit of chapter 3. The Scottsboro boys. There was a mention of those guys, the 9 black youth on the train. They were just hitchhiking a ride on the train, and there was a couple of white prostitutes on there that some of the white guys, I guess, blamed those boys and then coerced the white women to say it was them. And it became a major court case that I think one of the girls ended up telling the truth, that none of the black guys raped them. But it's just a prime example of the type of thing that was going on and the type of harassment and terrorism that these entertainers and other black people during that particular time had to endure, where it was a life and death situation and people were dying left and right. But I'll mute my line on that, Gus. Thanks for taking the call.
Much obliged, Mr. Demery Ford. It is 6:30 p.m. Pacific daylight savings time, and the trash was just picked up. I just wanted that on record because that is bizarre. Scottsboro boys, I feel it's mandatory. That is Rosa Parks, the General Rosa Parks. She gets a lot of credit for the Montgomery bus boycott, but she had been engaged in counter-racist efforts for decades. That was in the 1950s, mid 1950s. He was involved in trying to help get the Scottsboro boys released from greater confinement. So Rosa Parks. And as for the cowbell, way back when we were deciding what was going to be our next book, and we were trying to pick, and I said, man, do we have to read another book about a black male rapist? Does that have to be in every book? And whoop, I had never read, had not read this book before, but I already knew the Scottsboro was going to come up, and then I knew Othello was going to come up, and then, a lot of cowbell, black rapist, black male genitals, major theme in the system of white supremacy. Our narrator clutched 2 weeks in a row. Henry in Chicago, did you have commentary, sir?
Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
All right. Greetings, greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers and listeners. That was an interesting clip you played before the reading in regards to the. I'm assuming that the commentators were two black males talking about the Emperor Jones play, and how great it was, I guess. But VGQ, if they were black men who were commentating. In regards to the book, it's interesting. It's interesting how there's a lot of cowbells in this one. Where you talk about Othello, is the main thing. J.A. Rogers was mentioned. I think he has a white parent. I think C.L.R. James was also mentioned earlier in the book as well. The Scots. It's interesting how Dr. Horne basically talks about the Scottsboro case along with Othello, because of the fact that during this time Robeson is playing Othello while this case is going on. Basically, black males accused of raping white women, and I'm assuming that one of the fears of people here in this country about the play of Othello is this big, this black, Moor, raping a white woman. And I thought it was interesting when he said that he was doing the play and he got far away from the woman in a scene where they were supposed to be close. He made an interesting statement in regards to when he was preparing for his role in Othello, where he said that he was playing Othello as an African Negro instead of a Moor. Now, I thought about that one while I was reading it, and it kind of caught me. But I think unintentionally, Robeson was probably looking at this character and at the time frame of it as a character who is a victim of racism. That's why he called him an American Negro. Because if we look at history, the Moors were actually an empire, probably one of the last non-white black empires that actually, had one. So he felt like, this is more just, of a guy who's in a racist society, whereas, the Moorish kingdom wasn't in that type of system where, they were actually ruling Europe for centuries. So I think I can actually see what Robeson was talking about when he said that he was playing it as a Negro instead of a Moor, because Moors weren't back in that period, they weren't particularly under the system of white supremacy during that time up until their end. But yeah, I thought about that one. Maybe I might be wrong on that one, but looking at it from a historical content, I thought about that statement, that he made, because you hear the title of the play being, being a Moor, the Moor was the main character. And yes, the narration was hard, but I love doing stuff like this. For one, I'm a big fan of Gerald Horne's work. I like reading Gerald Horne. And actually, I haven't read this book yet, but this one also too is a good book by Dr. Horne. And also too, I'm an attempted parent, so I had a lot of practice reading to my children, so that actually helped. When you have to do the inflections of the voices, so when I'm reading, to my children or something like that, it's like you have to play the characters as well when you're reading to them. So that's all I have right now.
Reading is more important than watching television. Love to hear that. Sharpening up my narration skills by reading to my offspring. I know Dr. Welsing would have an enormous smile and a huge commendation for that. Man, keep it up. Keep it up. Other folks, if you have comments, observations, *61. We have a few moments before we get to the second audio clip. I thought that was an important observation, Henry in Chicago, about him, Robeson, talking about his mindset for playing the Moor in Othello, and saying he was playing him like a Moor and not a Negro. What I was thinking when I read that section was it reminded me of Mr. Fuller when he talked about dignified slave, silly one. Like, what's the difference? I was even thinking sometimes the racists will call these are niggers, these are Kafirs. I was thinking, like, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to be in a play where you are run crazy by a white woman, it all kind of looks niggerish to me. Plantational, that's in the word guide. Plantational, it still has a very plantational feel. Going in line with my notes, I'll be curious to hear other people's thoughts, because I thought that was an important portion of the text, other people's interpretation of that reading. Let's see, where am I? On page 28, kind of at the beginning. It reminded me of Thomas in New York. He speaks regularly about white validation. Pam, the late, talked about that a lot as well. Just a lot of bragging about, they did an all Negro concert in Greenwich Village, presumably for a white audience, because the audience was very high class. Generally, that means white people. When the boys appeared, there was thunderous applause lasting 3 minutes, and they were both very nervous. Yet after each number, the applause was deafening with the curtain call after curtain call. What drove the overwhelming positive reception to this concert was the startling fact that he was, as Robeson put it, the first Negro to give an all-Negro presentation of music on the foremost concert stage. And it's just something about black people singing. Even at this point, I mean, it's been a lot of Negro caroling going on by the 1930s, and certainly over the past almost 100 years since that time. Race soldiers love to hear a few coon songs. I mean, that is not, we heard that all the way back in Solomon Northup, 12 Years a Slave, where the plantation master would sneak in. I want to hear a little banjo time, little Fiddler Joe. I mean, that is a long-standing tradition under the system of white supremacy. And show-offism, just so much of it seems like show-offism. Let me get to rest of my note. Oh, man, book club. Book club has been here since 2012. The Spingerns have been mentioned a number of times. I suspect even some of the folks who are with us participating live have heard them pop up. I know specifically when we read signature work, the Little Rock Nine, their involvement with the NAACP came up specifically in that book, and they have come up other times. I would have to go back. I can look at my library with some of the texts that we've read to see other times that they have been mentioned. I know Pumpkin, some of our other listeners have pointed out that those whites, the Springer suspected racists, have been very deceptive in steering objectives of the NAACP, practicing racism, white supremacy, and in fact, He says specifically, this is on page 30, the Spingards, Joel, an author, and a number of others who could make and break careers thought that was so important, that white validation, white people have power. In fact, after the onset of the Red Scare, when Robeson became the leading target, White and Arthur Springern turned against him vociferously. And that was when I checked the footnote. That's footnote 51. I think that's in Mrs. Robeson's autobiography, which might be worth checking out as well. Dr. Horne, history professor, has written many books, as has been pointed out all the way through. Peripatetic. I had to stop and look that one up. What does that mean? The peripatetic couple. Good job, Henry in Chicago, on the pronunciation. Think I would have had to pause the recording to check that one out. Peripatetic, traveling from place to place, especially working or based in various places for relatively short periods. Let's see, next. Claude McKay, I just highlighted that because we had a reader or listener who suggested that we read Man-Child in the Promised Land. I think that's Claude McKay. I could be. I'll have to double check to make sure, but that was what I highlighted. Claude McKay. I thought it was such an interesting verbiage. Dr. Horne writes, with this is on page 32, Robeson's career took off like a gyrating Roman candle. As someone who regularly encourages paying attention to metaphor, I said, what? Like, I had to go search to make sure I had the correct idea of a Roman candle. I was like, yeah, I got that. And I had to think about like a gyrating Roman candle. Like, what? And then I really had to pause at the word gyrate, because that has generally a sexual connotation. You generally hear people saying gyrate your hips. If it's going to be some sort of dance motion that might have some sort of sexual movement to it. But generally, the word gyrating, I generally hear it associated with hips. I have never heard someone refer to a Roman candle as gyrating, but maybe I haven't, been exposed enough. But I put that in as this physique and something even sexual. The man knot, Dr. Welsing, being associated with the black whale. And that's not a quote, that's Dr. Horne's verbiage. Let's see. A lot of white validation when he talked about his love for going to Ireland. He said, this is Robeson's words, Ireland. He'd visited Ireland many times. I've kissed the Blarney, was his insider conclusion, and known many great Irishmen, meaning whites. And he mentioned Eugene O'Neill being a friend of his, white friends. This is the white man who wrote Emperor Jones. And I believe he also wrote All God's Children. That was the play that was mentioned before, where Robeson's character is a black male who's married to an abusive white woman who ruins his career as an attorney. His white friend, Mr. O'Neill, wrote this. Let's see, next. Bon vivant. That was another one I had to look up. French language, I generally give at least a side glance when it's a lot of non-English words in an English text. Like, who is this written for? Let's see, next. The word whatnots was included, and it was as a quote. It was large oil paintings of Turks elsewhere, whatnots, porcelain glass, and various knickknacks. I just thought, what a sentence. Knickknacks, whatnot, porcelain glass. That's what I thought. This is just show-offism. Like, it really stood out to me with all the name dropping of, ooh, this person was here, and this person was here, and look at these portraits, and look where we were eating, and how many. It really just, it felt like the social media culture of the 21st century of, look at this, picture of what we were eating and where we were at. And, ooh, look, I was with President Obama. And, ooh, look, I was with, Jay-Z and Beyonce. Like, ooh, you were like total just show-offism. And most of it is show-offism about white people that I was around going to white-dominated countries, all white theaters, and doing the only Negro performance that they've ever had. Like, that's a lot of what has stood out to me, like his stature, is because he's got so much of this attention from white people. They do mention a lot of non-white people around the world who also have high regard, but a lot of it thus far has just been a lot of white validation and show-offism, which I don't think is helpful to solving the problem. Let's see. Let's see. I think it's important. Robeson was twisting in agony, able to escape the normalized ravages that have beset so many Africans in North America, but knowing full well what a sorry plight continued to bedevil so many others, and even in London, which he had constructed as an ideal. There were serpents in the garden. Metaphor, Dr. Horne uses so many curious metaphors for a historical book, and this is a biography. Like, what? Serpents in the garden? You mean racism, white supremacy is a global system that you cannot just go to London or Europe or Australia and no longer have a problem being a Negro or a Moor or a Kafir or whatever they decide to call you. System of white supremacy is worldwide. I think that is more accurate, more precise, which is what we need with language as opposed to these curious metaphors. Gyrating like a Roman candle, that's a simile. Serpents in the car, like what? Let's see. Though the Robesons climbed the slippery pole of success, they had chosen not to shroud their objections to a color bar. Even that one I thought was curious. Now that is in quotes, but I mean, we got color bar, color line, all of this curious verbiage to avoid being precise, and particularly with a precise about white people doing something to harm people they say are not white. Let's see. I thought it was a way of deflection as well. Racial focal pointing. One of our listeners in Florida, his term, Robeson would not have been surprised by the designation of the true culprit. The annual invasion of American tourists is blamed by many persons for the exclusion of Negroes from some restaurants and hotels recently. For as was their wont, these interlopers insisted on global export of their peculiar ways. There is nothing peculiar about white supremacy, racism, and I think that is it is inaccurate, and it's racial. It's minimizing the culprits. It's not collective white people. It's just these few. It's almost like it's just these few racist hicks from the South. You know, from Georgia and Alabama came over here and demanded that we have enforce the color bar so we comply. That's not it at all. Adolf Hitler is coming to power right at this time saying the exact same thing and looking at some of the exact same models of what's happening in the United States, and we need to do the same thing here. White power, and let's get it cracking. I mean, yeah, to just try and say that this was the fault of whites coming from America, making them practice racism is, it's just not accurate. Next, color bar gets used again. William Patterson was mentioned this past weekend. Benjamin Crump, famous attorney, victim of racism. He has a book published recently. Is talking about white supremacy, racism, and one of the main themes of the book is that genocide is being waged against black people and black males in particular. And he cited William Patterson's efforts in the 1950s to charge genocide against the United States for racism, white supremacy. And I said this past weekend, oh, wow, he was mentioned in the book we're reading now, and there he goes. He gets mentioned again as a personal friendship, even though William Patterson is a white man. But he does have a book, We Charge Genocide, where you can read all about his efforts to bring that campaign to the United Nations. Emma Goldman talks in a very sexualized way about Mr. Robeson, saying this is a direct quote, Paul is calling him by his first name, doing strenuous work, seeing so often, traveling about the provinces. It's fortunate that he has such a splendid physique. He will be the most handsome Othello I have ever seen. Othello, as he said, was normally played by a white person blackening up. So, Dr. Welsing moment again. Some of the delectable Negro, too, I think. And the naked statue too. I thought that Dr. Welsing, delectable Negro. My goodness. The metaphors again. These are all Dr. Horne's words. As a celebrity, Robeson was fair game. Watch that word, fair. A recipient of poison-tipped arrows and a target for a public with an apparent ceaseless interest in his personal life, particularly as it relates to journalism. That is one of the key components of white supremacy racism. I am certain, like I would be willing to wager a substantial amount that Mr. Robeson has a COINTEL profile. The fact that a huge component of COINTELPRO was having the press attack certain black figures, and they said he was one of the key targets. House on Un-American Activities, this nigger's a communist, Mr. Robeson. He's traveling all over the world talking all these crazy ideas, singing his songs, playing Othello, kissing white women. It would not, in fact, it would surprise me, I'll say it that way. It would surprise me, according to all the evidence of white supremacy racism. It would be surprising if they did not have racists planting stories about Mr. Robeson or attacking him or trying to accuse him of having some sort of sexual arrangement with a white woman. You're still in a time period where black males were killed. But this is 25 years before Emmett Till. Next, the last one I'll get in, and then I'll see if anybody else has any comments or if I've been talking nutty. He says, when talking about the stress in their arrangement, the Robesons, no surprise, system of white supremacy worldwide, doesn't matter if they had money or not designed to have happy arrangements between black males and black females. But I thought it was interesting when she described their permanent break. She said, we never had the same taste in people, places, things. His education was literary, classical. Mine was entirely scientific as a chemist. His temperament was artistic. Mine strictly practical. He is vague. I am definite. He likes late hours. I am an early bird. He is not ambitious, although once having undertaken a thing, he is never content until he accomplishes it as perfectly as possible. I am essentially and aggressively ambitious. And that last portion, it stood out to me for so many reasons. She said that he is not ambitious. And I thought, wow, like Paul Robeson is not, like, I thought this guy was like an actor. He studied law at Columbia. He studied all these languages fluently. He did all this traveling. He played football collegiately, and he did all this social activism. I feel like I'm not even, he was a parent in addition to all of this. Like, he did all of that, and he's not ambitious. Like, really? It reminded me, it is so easy to slip into calling black people lazy. Like, what it reminded me of. Like, really? Paul Robeson is lazy? Like, huh. And then I said, wait a minute. I think Dr. Horne, he described that Paul Robeson, highly melanated, dark complexion black male, his wife, kind of pale. In fact, he said she was able to get access to places and resources that Mr. Robeson could not, that old black male privilege, because he's a dark-skinned black male. And I thought, wow, now does that have any bearing on her thinking that he is not ambitious, kind of lazy, while she is aggressively ambitious? We have about 3 minutes. Any thoughts on that? If I said anything nonsense, you should speak up to.
I think the comment about Paul not being ambitious is just kind of her being scorned about, Paul's alleged extramarital affairs. I think that's what that was, and also too, I forgot one other cowbell, William Patterson. I think later on you'll find out that he was married to a Russian woman, so that was another cowbell. That's all.
Much obliged, Henry in Chicago. Any other quick comments folks need to get in before we get to the second audio segment?
Hello.
Irie, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, even though I missed that part about you were talking about how they mentioned the Americans basically showing the racism and being confused about Europeans, I found that to be true in hearing biographies and watching even the movie they made about Josephine Baker, being confused about racism because they're so refined, because they've, I'm not sure how to say it, they've delecticized, I guess, or they've made delectable these people for, their consumption because of their beauty and their their physical state, that they don't think the Europeans are racist or as racist as American Europeans.
Much obliged, Irie. That confused. That's why one of the core components, what does it mean to be white anywhere in the world? What does that classification mean? That is at the core of the problem. When you get confused about that and you leave the so-called country and land in a different part of the globe and someone classified as white, well, we're not in the United States anymore. So this is my good friend, Eugene O'Neill. He writes plays about crazy black guys who slice up other black guys in dice games and go to jail. He's great and definitely not racist. We will get to the second audio segment, picking up on chapter 3. If you have other comments or questions from the first audio segment, just make a note. We should have time to share once this segment ends. We're in chapter 3, kind of the early portion of Dr. Gerald Horne. Paul Robeson, The Artist as Revolutionary. Context of White Supremacy. This is audio segment number 2.
Then there was her ambition for him, which drove him to even greater heights, and which she revealed, I, a member of one of the socially elect Negro families in Washington, D.C., said of her elite status in the U.S., which was true. I have met, in many cases, become friends with many world-class celebrity, and I have learned to find my way about in Paris, Berlin, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, and Bucharest. All true, too. I know personally nearly every Negro of interest and important both at home and abroad. Equally accurate. I have acted as guide in Harlem to many people, from Count Hermann Kieserling, the eminent German philosopher, and Mr. Noel Coward, the noted British playwright. The problem was that her spouse was not as impressed with such accomplishments as she was. In informing the singer and actress Etta Moulton about financial arrangements, Miss Robeson said with pride that our own agents are the finest in the business, but our straight musical agents and handle, she added proudly, only the world-known musicians such as Rachmaninoff and Horowitz and Robeson. In other words, Robeson was in the ionosphere of artists. A perch did that not include Moulton, and such heights were pleasingly important to Miss Robeson, not as much to her spouse. Though she was directing his career, she was not a good manager of money either, leaving the couple to borrow thousands of pounds to liquidate debts at the time when his income was climbing steadily. Financially, of course, I'm still struggling, said Robeson, at a time when he had attained a measure of fame and the income that goes along with it. Robeson, who was loath to write, this was a piece of the reclusiveness that gripped the last years of his life and his preference for reading, studying, and learning, let alone write of his social conquests, unlike Eslanda, was then evolving to the point where learning languages, a preeminent solitary pursuit, was his defining habit, and thus was growing apart from his spouse. From all appearances, he was not as concerned with the world of celebrity fame, which seems to captivate Miss Robeson. As so often happens, financial pressures were exacerbating the everyday pressures of marriage. Resolving this tension, which is what the couple did, was to save their marriage. I do not make enough money here to warrant all the fuss, Robeson warned his wife. Really, when straight tax and super tax is added, I make nothing, and living expenses are terrible. He was pondering seeking a tax haven in Kitzbühel, Australia, also a skiing haven in the Alps. If not there, perhaps Salzburg, or maybe outside Paris. It would be much cheaper, and I can come over to England to fulfill my engagements, a site of most of his lucrative opportunities. I certainly need different audiences for my work, he counseled, a necessity driven by his growing interest in performing in different languages, a path initially driven by commerce, but which was to lead, ironically, to socialism. People who are interested in us, he advised, will have to see us mainly on the continent. Your letter upset us very much indeed, was the response of Van Vetchen to their impending split. We cannot quite imagine you and Paul apart, but that was precisely what was on the cards in the wake of Robeson's triumph as Othello. The couple came to see that wife and manager involved different roles and that could easily conflict, including rifts. Of course, these roles could be mutually reinforcing. Noelle Coward has been marvelous to me, she enthused, and had come often to the flat to talk with me, dine with me, and I had been out with him. I'm so glad we are friends, said the British writer, and thank you for being so sweet to me. We'll be delighted to have dinner, he added, to her marital problems reached a new crescendo. Looking forward to seeing you then. It did not hurt the career of Robeson, the actor, for his spouse and manager to be a friendly with a leading playwright. The marital tension exacted a toll. Paul is ill again, wrote Eslanda. A very bad cold, perhaps a mild attack of influenza. I hear on all sides that he is very depressed, she informed Van Vetchen. So unsettled mentally. Besides, he does not know his own mind. When he gets his divorce, he may get himself together, she added with a scoff. I hate the idea of him being unhappy and disorganized, his present state. Terribly ill with nerves, reported Miss Robeson of herself in late 1930, a nervous breakdown that went into paralysis and lost the use of the whole left side of my face. I was a sight and thought I would be permanently paralyzed. Thus, she moaned, I'm not coming to America with him this time, mainly because he doesn't want me. He's fallen in love with another girl. And thus, his life is rather complicated. In other words, he has not only strayed, but gone on a hike. Her husband, she said, needed a good rest, but an objective observer could have made the same prescription for her. Marital conflicts led to others. The London press reported that whereas Robeson was sympathetic to Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican organizer, his spouse was not. She was enthusiastic, for example, about the play by Wallace Thurman entitled Jeremiah the Magnificent, which she describes as detailing the life of Garvey, the famous West Indian rascal. Yet, as often happened with couples, they overcame this rough patch, and once again it seemed that the question of racism was a factor, in that his presumed paramour was not black, and there was concern how an interracial couple would fare in the U.S. The same question was a factor when Robeson's comrade, William Patterson, left his Russian spouse behind in the Soviet Union when he returned to the U.S. The personal was merging with the political, all of which was driving him towards deeper political understandings. Robeson's extramarital liaisons was disproportionately with white women, but it was this kind of relationship that would not be easy to eventuate in marriage. This difficulty helped him to lead him back to his black wife. Moreover, though the record is not clear, it is probably not coincidental that his reconciliation with his spouse coincided with his deeper political engagement, in that a white wife would have complicated his ability to become a leader of African Americans, and also coincided with his increasingly close relationship to Patterson, who was impelled to make a similar racial choice. With a kind of marital stability emerging after months of rockiness, Robeson was able to turn his attention more fully to his art and what was becoming its close complement, the study of languages. The world had not stood still as Robeson's bickered. The Scottsboro case, a racist frame-up of 9 black youths in Alabama based on a spuriously explosive charge of interracial rape, was delivering a dose of adrenaline to Americans' bloodstream, as millions watched worldwide, serving to augment membership in the communist parties that had arisen concomitant with the Russian Revolution of 1917. At the same time, in direct reaction, fascism was increasing too, first in Italy, then in Germany. Now resident in continental Europe, the Robesons had a ringside seat as this tumult unfolded. "We are here en route to Bucharest from Vienna," said Miss Robeson, speaking of Budapest, then into Yugoslavia. They were traveling regularly to Berlin, where Paul would do 3 special performances of The Emperor Jones in English. Then, in the midst of their marital woes, they managed to star in Borderline, filmed in Switzerland. "Paul and I had great fun making a film in Switzerland a few weeks ago," said Miss Robeson, asserted, and on the way there, they enjoyed Berlin enormously, which was not their opinion most decidedly when they visited the German capital a few years later after Hitler's rise. "It was an experimental movie," she said correctly about a film that was a cinematic breakthrough and, as well, helped to solder a marriage that seemed to be on the point of disintegration. It was a silent film with English intertitles that involved a fraught matter that Scottsboro and Othello, and, not coincidentally, their own lives confronted: interracial relationships. It was avant-garde in execution, influenced by the Soviet cineast Sergei Eisenstein, with whom the couple would soon be acquainted in Moscow. It was groundbreaking too, dealing with race and sexuality at a time when such issues were hardly the staple of cinema. It may have been reconciling too, in it that it offered an acting opportunity to Miss Robeson, providing her with a career option and allowing her to participate more directly in the art that was becoming the preoccupation of her husband. It was also significant that this film was made in Europe, not Hollywood, a site where such cinematic daring, least with all involving the benighted Negro, was not on the agenda. With rich and imaginative cutting or montage and riveting foci, the story is told to 2 Negroes who drift in and out of a small town poisoned by petty jealousies, vicious malice, and gossip. Throughout the film, those who are defined as white are presented negatively as, according to one critic, a picture of sordid calculation and unbridled jealousy, of corruption and decadence, while the blacks symbolize what is pure and natural. Daringly, there is a glimpse of a white man being lynched for his attention to a Negro woman. After the artistic success of the Swiss film, the artistically energized Robeson returned to London and, said his spouse began trying out a new stunt. He took the Savoy Theater for a week and offered his own program, which turned out to be such a success. This took him on the road for a 10-week tour, as audiences were enthralled by his group of spirituals, one group of folk song, one group of secular songs, and the last scene from The Emperor Jones. Robeson also found time to embark on a course that would simultaneously influence his language study, his art, and his politics. It was in 1920s and especially 1930s London that Robeson discovered Africa, or more precisely, meant countless African exiles who shaped him inexorably. This growing list included Joshua Nkomo, a founder of the movement that helped to lead Zimbabwe, then Rhodesia, to independence. He also collaborated with the League of Colored People in London, which too included a modicum of individuals of African origin. He had began to take courses to that end at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. That discovery, he said, profoundly influenced my life. Robeson came to know many Africans, including future presidents and prime ministers, such as Ezekwe and Nkrumah and Kenyatta. A number of these Africans were students, and I spent many hours talking with them and taking part in their activities at the West African Students' Union building, said Robeson. Somehow, they came to think of me as one of them. They took pride in my success, of which were many then. And they made Miss Robeson and me honorary members of the Union. He also came to know another class of Africans, the seamen in the ports of London, Liverpool, and Cardiff. So inspired, I studied their languages, as I do to this day, he recalled in 1953. This study included Yoruba, Efik, Benin, Ashanti, and the others. And it was then that he came to know of the remarkable kinship between African and Chinese cultures, which contributed to his advocating closer cooperation between the two, notably after the triumph of the Chinese Revolution. He pored over relevant British publications, in other words, the New Statesman. I argued and discussed the subject Africa with men like H.G. Wells and Harold Lasky and Nehru. He became so passionate about the topic that British intelligence came one day to caution me about the political meanings of my activities. Whitehall and British intelligence services, too, may have known that he subsidized the budget of the West African Student Union, which included numerous presumed radicals. When he spoke to them, auditoriums were jammed routinely. At one effusive gathering in the 1930s, attendance was at a record high, as loud cheers greeted his pledge that anti-colonialism would become his life cause and visiting the continent would become a priority to that end. This visit by intelligent officials may have been driven by Robeson's own words. For example, when he informed an inquisitive Manchester journalist that for 3 or 4 months of every year, I'm going to live in Africa among my own people. In fact, said Robeson, I shall make my headquarters in Africa. A seemingly likely prospect, since by that point he had already learned 2 African languages. If that were not enough to cause consternation among the colonialists, he also was contemplating singing in Java, Malay, China, and Japan. Why not? I'm studying their folk songs, said Robeson, in their own languages, and desired an outlet for his virtuosity. A contemporaneous account asserted that he was on his way to Cape Town, a venture that did not materialize, but this too may have piqued his interest among intelligence operatives. It was in the 1930s that he arrived at a realization that was to take on significant import in coming decades. I am one of the very few, he said, who persists in suggesting that the African culture form is in many respects similar to the old archaic Chinese pre-Confucius, pre-Lao Tse. As Ethiopia was on the verge of being torn by an epical Italian invasion, and China was reeling from sharp lances from Japan, Robeson was sufficiently prescient to observe, I am as interested in the problem which confronts the Chinese people as well as in those which concern, for example, Abyssinia, to me, he said with particular profundity. The time seems long past when people can afford to think exclusively in terms of national units. As Robeson came to know more about Africa, it had multiple effects. It enhanced his understanding of his own people, African Americans, and increased his desire to participate more fully in their uphill battle. It led him to Moscow, in that the Soviet Union was one of the few nations which took a strident anti-colonial position. It not only led him to study more languages, but it also influenced his acting choices, particularly in cinema. And this language study, inspired in no small part by Africa, increased his popularity as an artist, since he would sing in songs of various nations, creating more lucrative appearances, frequently concerts ultimately paid more handsomely than infrequently, and often demeaning films. His concerts were particularly popular in Europe, but in that turn was bringing him face to face with the rise of fascism, a development that ultimately radicalized him. Surely the virtuous circle created allowed him to reside comfortably in London, a fact discovered by the visiting African-American journalist Shirley Graham, who was to become later the wife of W.E.B. Du Bois, Robeson's friend and comrade during numerous Red Scare battles in the U.S. Graham was struck by the vine-covered brick house in Hampstead, one of the most beautiful and exclusive suburbs of London. She informed her mostly black and no doubt impressed audience, facing the famous Heath, with grounds sloping down from the back to a lovely park and swept by cool breezes from the channel. It also featured an old-fashioned English garden, a solemn-faced French butler. Apparently, the Robesons had replaced their aides with Cockney accents. Will conduct you up the winding stairway to the big library, sitting room on the second floor. Books, books, books were all about. There were solid big chairs and lovely rugs, and readers were assured, contrary to press accounts, an utterly happy wife. Adjoining the library was a room for Robeson's use, and it was added with similar reassurance, large high ceiling, and wholly masculine as befits a big man. Yes, she rejoiced. He has a genius, he has brains, and he has a wife. Emphasis original. Of course, this was partially propaganda, though not in the pejorative sense, in that her African-American audience, under perpetual assault for its alleged intellectual deficiency, could jubilate in her portrait of a brainy Robeson, just as this same community told constantly about its supposedly family breakdown, could jubilate about the drawn role of Miss Robeson. It was precisely this kind of press coverage that was converting Robeson into a folk hero among blacks, an attraction that would lure him back home once war erupted in Europe and the tug of his people's desperate struggles could no longer be ignored. But it was not just starstruck visiting Negro journalists who were seduced by the radiance emitted by the wattage of the Robesons. Alexander Woolcott was at the apex of reporting profession in Manhattan and had little incentive to portray Robeson in flattering terms. But that he did, depicting the artist simply as the world's most famous Negro. Woolcott was stunned to hear Robeson speaking Russian without an accent, all the more remarkable since this skill was developed without residing for any length of time in the Soviet Union. Robeson said the impressed journalist has such extraordinary power of concentration that he can sit wrapped at linguaphone language tapes 12 hours a day, leaving it only long enough to go to the icebox for an occasional glass of milk, but never leaving it all to answer the persistent telephone. As Woolcott saw Robeson, he strayed from the language study, only when word comes from Miss Robeson that the rent is due. And then, only then, does the man emerge and sing or act for a week or two. Then, back he goes into the luxurious seclusion of the work. Once he was asked about his study of languages, asking how many he can speak, a simple query for mere mortals. But Robeson found it hard to answer. In a few words, the learning of languages was not only fun, but a game with rich rewards. I have learned French, German, Spanish, Chinese, Efik, an African language, and Yiddish. I can read the literature in these languages, can sing songs in them with such impeccable pronunciation, accent, and even inflection and color that people to whom these languages are native will not believe that I am not fluent. And, he added, I would probably be able to do a play in any of these languages with a little help. He doubted his fluency in these languages while confirming, I can follow and take part in some not too specialized conversations in them. After I have lived in those countries for 3 months, I'm confident I could be fluent. He was then polishing his Hebrew, Norwegian, Czech, modern Greek, ancient Latin, and Portuguese. Yet, with all that, he conceded openly in 1950, when such assertions brought no premium, Russian is the only foreign language I can say, I can read, and I can speak fluently. That is, I can sing songs in Russian with ease and confidence. For, in learning the languages, I work at catching the essential spirit of the language. And I think I can speak Russian more than any other foreign language because I like it better. In fact, I would probably be able to do plays better in Russian than in modern English because I find the language richer, warmer, more fully expressive, more colorful than modern English. He went further to assert that the Russian language today is comparable to Shakespearean English, young, forceful, and rich. Yet, it was not Russian and African languages alone that had attracted Robeson. During the summer of 1932, he told his spouse that, my French is coming fine, and I'm also working on German and Spanish. The latter language was becoming the de facto second official language of his homeland, while the former exposed him to a catalog of songs and well-played concerts. Of course, he added, my Russian is unbelievable, which apparently was infecting his personality. I do remain so esoteric at times. Very Russian, I guess. Emphasis original. His knowledge of Russian was propelled by budding interest in the Bolshevik Revolution and tireless labor, both of which were becoming hallmarks of his life. This knowledge required countless hours of study, and it became difficult for some journalists to accept that a man thought of as an actor, a singer, a celebrity, would spend so much time in this fashion. So one reporter noted, "I happen to speak it too, and I tried it out on it. We chatted for a while in the language, and he told me that having mastered it and French and German, he was now turning his attention to Hebrew." So there sat an impressed reporter, and then the garrulous Robeson. We sat and smoked and drank incredible quantities of lemon tea as they discussed Dostoevsky and Pushkin. The latter two, readers were told, were his favorite Russian art authors, whom he reads for hours at night when he can't sleep, or when I'm not over fond of the world, or when he couldn't perform because of problems of central heating in London, which dries up his voice so that he can't sing. Robeson's voice was sufficiently suitable for Du Bois Haywood and George Gershwin to press him to star in their newly created Porgy and Bess. This particular combination, said Hayward, you, George, and myself, stood to produce something at least memorable, perhaps almost great, though it was understandable why Robeson turned him down in light of his admission that he was gathering authentic ideas and themes from the primitive Negroes in the back country of Carolina. Miss Robeson made it clear that her spouse was enthusiastic about playing the leader of a Carolina slave revolt, Denmark Vesey, rather than the saccharine character that was Porgy. Hayward's spouse was happy that you are enthusiastic in the idea of a Vesey play, though he conceded that it had very little of the all-important man-woman interest. The theme is solely Vesey's devotion to and work for his cause, with no song and very little laughter. Haywood found it to be a personal disappointment that we're not going to be together, but if he had paid attention to Robeson's trajectory, he would have not been surprised by this rejection. With the attention delivered by the star turn in Othello, his discovery of Africa, the urgency of the Scottsboro case, directed by his old friend from Harlem, William Patterson, the concomitant growing influence of communist parties, particularly in London and Moscow, and the rise of fascism, Robeson was at a crossroads. His personal triumphs seemed to wane in comparison to the problems encountered by other Africans, including his own family. I can come in to exalt and luxurious inner sanctums, he told a British journal, but my own brother, my own father, cannot come in behind me. This recognition helped to impel Robeson towards firmer political commitment.
Context of White Supremacy. Had the delay while I was listening to the audio. Concluded our second audio segment. We will pick up next week. Same time. We'll be in November officially. Full-fledged autumn. The number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We should have about a good 30 minutes or so. If folks have other comments they would like to share, All the folks who dialed in previously should be with us if you have a hand up. If we missed you totally and you were with us during the first audio segment, or if we did not get to hear from you during the first audio segment, and you have a comment or question you would like to share, go ahead and get your hand up now. Do not wait till the last minute if you would like to speak, and we will make sure that you're one of the first folks to get on the line. Let's see. Irie, Mr. Demery, for retired firefighter, you are all with us. I will look for other hands as we roll. Again, if we missed you totally and you think you might want to share, *61. Don't wait till the last few minutes. Folks who have comments, proceed.
Can I be heard?
Retired firefighter.
Yes, sir. And everybody. It's surprising that Mr. Robeson had time for any extramarital social liaisons because he was so dedicated to learning other languages. And I can't help but to recall on how Mr. Fuller, I've heard Mr. Fuller state that the whole idea of non-white black people enjoying can just transfer that enjoyment from something like sports or dancing or whatever to the things that Mr. Robeson was engaging himself in on a daily basis for hours, literally for hours. That was an observation in this last report. Also, of his influence was rapidly drawing the concern of the race soldiers, the white race soldiers of the world, literally of the world, because of his quote-unquote talent. And he was being compensated for it, galloping all over the areas where white people, their particular home places. And in turn, what he was doing beyond what he was getting compensated for was had an interest into non-white people's concerns. And it wasn't by accident of his encounters with some of the most well-known African who eventually became heads of states that he had from my understanding, because I was talking with the non-white victim of racist white supremacy that I've been known for years that recommended his book to me. All of those future African leaders he had influences over, and his contacts with them was sharing, exchanging views on neutralizing the global system of racist white supremacy. Mr. Horne just identifies it as colonialism, in other words, as such. And I would say still today is somebody that was of his global magnitude. It was I guess during that time it would be considered to be a sight to see for someone who could have just lasted with just showing off and being showed off to actually, in this particular reading, getting more and more intense into sharing and also involving himself in the global system of countering, neutralizing racism, white supremacy. And as I mentioned before, in this report, he is getting now getting attention from global race soldiers on that matter. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Global system. Other folks who dialed in, if you have comments to share, line should be open. Proceed. Folks might be taking a few moments to get their thoughts together. I will share a few. Oh, there's Irie. I do hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry about the tardiness. I was trying to put something down. But yeah, before, I don't want to take too long. Let's see. I just found it was interesting to hear how he was enamored in learning these languages. And a perspective I have over the years, I've developed that racists definitely don't want black people, non-white people, but specifically us, learning a variety of languages, because it makes you, in what I would conclude according to the code, it makes you more universal when you're able to learn and languages, and also because these languages, relationships, particularly among non-white people, whatever their classifications would be, that's more apt to happen, of some type of relationship with other non-whites, so they understand their positions in, the system of racism and how they're being done wrong. And also, it was one other thing. Hold on, let me see. No, I can't remember it. I apologize. But I do see why they would start to focus on him, because of the languages he's picking up. And he's demonstrating, they know he's able to pick up sundry of them, and then also making those actual connections to non-white people overseas. And while at the same time there's, I think, no, that's later. So I'll just mute my line, but it's going to happen again where black people are going to start to universalize themselves by reaching out and talking to African people throughout the world and sharing with each other about the system of racism, white supremacy. But, yeah, I just saw that with the language stuff with Mr. Robeson and black people now. That's why they don't teach foreign language too much until it's really too late in schools these days. They don't want us to be universal like that.
Much obliged, Irie. That is a component of being a so-called nigger in the system of white supremacy, having a very limited perspective of the world, a very small way of thinking, not universal, very, very stingy, narrow thinking, and certainly not having a wide understanding of language and the use of words to communicate. That is not what being a nigger is supposed to be about. Other folks dialed in, have comments, questions they want to make sure they share.
Yes, may I be heard?
Mr. Demery 4.
Yes. Okay, the things that stood out for me, like the firefighter from Florida said, with everything that Paul Robeson had going on, I don't see how he had time for a lot of romantic interests. But Nina Mae McKinney, I guess an actor at the time, she was African American. He was rumored to be with her, and I think his wife may have confirmed it, with her concerns. She had a nervous breakdown. And, it's pretty stressful when you're trying to control and run somebody else's life along with your own. But she had different interests than he had. And when the book said that he became interested. He discovered Africa. Okay, so now he started becoming interested in the struggle of people. You know, the average person, and at the same time, I guess he was enjoying popularity. Excuse me, and it became, a passion of his to become interested in social matters. But then that's about the same time that the British intelligence services came by to caution him, he said, about the political meaning of his activities. So that means he's being spied on and followed, and there's a whole British intelligence service that's got it. Like you said, he probably had a dossier with the COINTELPRO as well as other these white countries' intelligence services. Anywhere he traveled, and you know that if he met those African leaders over there, those the whites in South Africa and some of those other countries trying to control the events in Africa knew of his presence. And, I thought it was interesting, too, that all of the noteworthy people, Dubois, his wife, the people that he was beginning to associate with, were starting to influence him also, and I think that he was becoming more aware, and he started to so-called put, his efforts financially as well as physically into bringing about some type of relief to other non-white people and possibly an end to racism, white supremacy. But I'll mute my line. Thanks, sir.
Much obliged, Mr. Demery, for *61, the folks who dialed in. If you have something you want to share before we wrap things up, some of the notes that I took from this section. Mrs. Robeson, she said there was her ambition for him, which drove him to even greater heights, in which she reveled. In quotes, "I am a member of one of the socially elect Negro families in Washington, D.C., she said of her elite status in the U.S., which was true. I have met and in many cases become friends with many world-class celebrities, and I have learned to find my way about in Paris, Berlin, Prague, blah, 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 blah. I think I had said before about show-offism. Even reminds me a little bit of Jay Dean from Tar Baby. Does that seem a little Jay Deanish, folks? You can think about that one. But I thought the most important part of all of that, the show-offism and everything else, white validation, was at the end, that the problem was that her spouse, Mr. Robeson, was not as impressed with such accomplishments, and that's in quotes, even if these can be considered accomplishments, as she was. That is enormous in the system of white supremacy in terms of what you prioritize. The financial component of this I just thought was important because that's such a pattern. He says, financially, I'm still struggling, said Robeson, at a time when he had attained a measure of fame and income that goes along with it. Robeson, who was loath to write, this was a piece with reclusiveness. And he says, I don't make enough money here to warrant all the fuss. Robeson warned his wife, really, when straight tax and super tax is added, I make nothing and living expenses are terrible. It seems for eons, doesn't matter who it is, black people and those taxes, man, like, whoo, they are going to get you. Like, it might look like we hooked you up with some cornbread, a few nickels, but buddy, we are going to take them back and then some. Let's see. When this is on 48, The couple overcame their rough patch, and once again it seemed the question of racism was a factor in that his presumed paramour, cowbell again, was not black, and there was a concern how an interracial couple would fare in the U.S. The same question was a factor when Robeson's comrade, William Patterson, previously mentioned, left his Russian spouse behind. Important, we talked about this before, possibility of Mr. Robeson being feverish. I'd said that was going to come up. Whether all of that is accurate or not, again, that could be lies. I said, hey, that is part of COINTELPRO and other times to make some sort of accusation that this black guy is down with this white woman. It could be true. Certainly you had a lot of that happen with a lot of black people. Josephine Baker was mentioned before, black males and black females who were victimized by whites when they went across seas and, oh, wow, white people aren't racist over here. And that's confusion is lethal. Let's see. They talked about some of the other films that he participated in. Let's see. They talked about the film where it showed some element of counter-racism. They're trying to show white people as being deceptive and amoral. And they even had a scene where a white person was being lynched for looking at a black female. Like, how interesting. I thought that was super important, like highlight 2 times when he said, I argued and discussed the subject of Africa with men like H.G. Wells, white man, Harold Lasky, and Nehru. He became so passionate about the topic that British intelligence came one day to caution me about the political meaning of my activity. If it's got to the point where white enforcement officers are coming to talk to you about what you have to say, really about anything, but particularly if it's something that might be sounding like you're talking about racism, I think I just said a few weeks back, many, many black people have been killed just for speaking about racism, white supremacy all over the world. Steve Biko, Dr. King, Minister Malcolm, long list of black people who have been killed just for talking. They weren't saying, let's go out and kill people, didn't have a gun, a spear, nothing. Just talking about this as a problem, and that was enough to warrant them being killed. So, yeah, I'm very sure Mr. Robeson was probably under more duress than we or even he knew from very early stages in his career. Let's see. Porgy and Bess is such a huge Dr. Welsing moment. She's been on this very program, Dr. Welsing, and talked about this play, Porgy and Bess, Hayward and Gershwin, because it's so prominent. They still feature this play, songs from the play. Dr. Welsing talks specifically about the song, I Got Plenty of Nothing, and Nothing is Good Enough for Me. Saying that if you have black people thinking like that in the system of white supremacy, they will be easily controlled slaves, victims of racism for eternity. And to worship that was such a popular play all the time. You're not going to have very many opportunities to see black people in a play, in a big production type of a thing. And so this is going to be one, Porgy and Bess, and just show it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Again, I got plenty of nothing, and nothing is good enough for me. And it talked about Mr. Robeson, black self-respect, to reject this play and say, and on top of that he would rather gathering authentic ideas and themes from primitive Negroes. That's the folks who put this together, which does not surprise me given what I just said. And then that Mr. Robeson made it clear that her spouse, or Miss Robeson, her spouse, was enthusiastic about playing the leader of a Carolina slave revolt, Denmark Vesey. It's 2020 basically, and I don't think we could get a play on Denmark Vesey, movie on Denmark Vesey. I don't think they could get a Netflix series like the Central Park 5 or the 1 week or the 5-episode miniseries Denmark Vesey, American Hero. I don't think they could do that right now. Let's see. Traveling. I guess I would emphasize that them talking about the languages and the traveling, and particularly him going to the continent, that had a big impact. I think traveling in general, I've talked about that before. When you can travel, maybe it doesn't happen for everybody. Certainly it doesn't happen for all victims of racism. But I think if you have some semblance of grasp of white supremacy racism, and then you can get out and travel and being able to really see, like, oh, this is not just isolated to Alabama. This is not just the Scottsboro boys. This is a problem in Ghana. This is a problem all over the continent. This is a problem in Australia. You had people writing them from there like, oh, I see. This is much larger than my original way of thinking about this problem. That I think has happened for a lot of black people, particularly as it moved forward, where you had people like Malcolm X and the Black Panther Party saying, hey, oh my goodness, I started thinking, same thing. Problem we are experiencing here as black people, that's the same thing that's happening on the continent. Like, we should link all this together. Global system of white supremacy. Yes. What does it mean to be white anywhere in the known universe? Yes. Any other comments, questions? Folks want to make sure they get in before we wrap up this week's session of Paul Robeson by Dr. Gerald Horne.
Yes. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Added on to my observations is Mr. Horne, although this is a biography on Paul Robeson, he does mention his wife in a lot in this biography. I would assume it's because of her business connections that she had with her husband. But it also reminds me of Mr. Fuller stating about the advent under the global system of racist white supremacy, a black male and black female under the same roof in quote unquote attempted marriage. It would never be Shangri-La. That was a word, that was a metaphor that he uses. But if you are codified, you would have a chance in it being livable as far as under the global system of racist white supremacy. That's what it reminds me of as far as what Mr. Horne is explaining between the two non-white victims of racism and white supremacy. Also, last but not least, I'm thinking about these some of these plays and different choices of events that Mr. Robeson was being invited to use his talents in, and the white male, I think it's O'Neill or either Gershwin or both, somehow reminds me of the white male in the 70s that had all of these television programs, these negative television programs that depicted black people in a negative way in the 1970s. If you could help me out, I just can't think of his name right now. It was Good Times and several of all those programs. It's kind of like something similar to what I'm listening to in the book, as far as some of these programs of all some sort of nature of I guess you would call it like a slave-like type of mentality in some of these plays and whatnot. It transfers over time is what point I'm making into even today when you look at television a lot, you see some of the similar displays of racism into depicting black people in negative terms still today. And certainly Mr. Robeson was affected by that. And but like you said, it would be even interesting today if they had anything on the revolutionary that he wanted to play. I forgot the name already, but yeah, it would be interesting. Denmark Vesey, yes. It would be really, even today, if they had a movie or something on him, I don't know, starring Denzel Washington or somebody, but yeah, it would be interesting even today. Mm-hmm.
Norman Lear, I think, All in the Family and Good Times.
Yes, that's him. That's him.
Reminds me of the Spingerns with the NAACP. I believe Mr. Lear is also so-called Jewish in addition to being a suspected racist. Yeah, lots of similarities. Did anybody else, any final comment before we conclude? Pretty much did our 3 hours.
I have a quick question that doesn't have to be answered now, but since earlier they brought up how, you know, he was in Othello, I know there's another play that white people love that most of the time, as far as I know, features a non-white black female as the lead singer or actress, and that's, I think it's Aida. I don't know how to pronounce it properly. I'm not sure. It may be Ada, A-I-D-A. So I'm wondering what that play is about, since they make sure to showcase a non-white female, like they make sure to showcase a non-white male in Othello. And yeah, I feel very bad hearing that he had those financial troubles, but like you said, that's the system. They're going to make sure they get their coins back, and if they don't get their coins back, they'll probably try to tie you up in some type of litigation or adjudication, you know, by trashing your name and making you out to be some type of sexual predator, so your money is depleted by that. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Yes. Can I say one?
Mr. Demery Ford, yes, sir.
I just wanted to say one last thing. Mr. Robeson was traveling. I guess they were going to Moscow, and he was going to stop in Germany for a while. And he was speaking in German or whatever, and the crowd were forming, and he was on the platform, and he said that, you know, he feared for his life. He remembered getting ready for a possible attack and determined to take some of the stormtroopers with me when cooler heads prevailed. And even his wife said later that, you know, she was taken back by, you know, what was happening. She had a heightened sense of her own political consciousness. And it said that she confided in her diary what the feeling must be of a black in Mississippi. Terror, fear, horror, tension, nerves strained to a breaking point. And, you know, I just started, I mean, she put it like that, but that could have been a black anywhere in any state in America. And this was in 1933, 1934, they're in Germany, and they're rounding up Jews. And we know from that book, The Bastards of the Rhineland, that they didn't, they cared even less for blacks than they did for the Jews at that time. So their lives were in danger at that time. And for her to make that statement, you know, it just, I don't know, it seemed that she was really, really confused. I'll mute my line.
Much obliged, Mr. Demery Ford. Dr. Welsing, she went to Germany to do her studying about white supremacy, racism. Imagine that, ended up in Germany in 1930 as a black person, and a pack of white people tries to attack you. Who would think such a thing could happen? Next Thursday, session number 3, making our way through the book. Look at the references. They do have some interesting other books, articles mentioned, might be worth checking out, doing a little reading, including Mr. Robeson's autobiography, Here I Stand. Check it out. Might be a few interesting tidbits as well. We will be here tomorrow for Neutralizing Workplace Racism. Some of this is workplace racism right here. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And then again on Saturday, compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Much obliged, again, to our volunteer narrators, retired firefighter, Henry in Chicago. If anybody would like to help us as we think maybe 4 or 5 sessions left, would like to help out as we proceed, you can drop an email and let me know. We will get you on the schedule so nobody is too burdened as we move through the text. With that, much obliged. Reading is more important than trick-or-treating. Hopefully we will all survive this evening. Keep those porch lights off and try not to eat too much of that nonsense. Save your chompers. Sobriety would be best, especially this here weekend. Man, sobriety would be best. They will have a lot of sobriety checkpoints out, probably in areas where a lot of non-white people are warehoused, forced to reside. Be mindful of that as you're out and about, and even drive defensively because there'll probably be intoxicated people out on the roadways. So be mindful of that. And dangerous system we're in, lots of alcohol drinking is promoted. Heard some of that in the text too. In addition to being sober, let's be buckled up every time we are in a vehicle, driver or passenger. Let's do all that we can to be as safe as possible under the system of white supremacy racism. If we are driving, we're not on the phone, just doing the little things to minimize contact with the Amber Geigers of the known universe. With that, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.